we're involved in the community. We're helping the ecosystem grow and thrive.
You're giving it the components and the pieces so that someone can actually institute it and build it into their workflows. And that's pretty magical.
So really trying to get like in the weeds and being there with the people that are potentially using our software, so that we have a good connection to them.
We circle back to this concept that a host has a responsibility to the WordPress community. Welcome to Impressive Hosting, where we seek to uncover core tenets of great WordPress hosting. I'm your host, Jesse Friedman. And with me today, and as part of part 2, is Chris Reynolds from Pantheon. Chris, one thing I didn't mention to you in the last episode is that growing up in high school, I had a very close friend named Chris Reynolds. So every time I go to say that out loud, I have to remember that you and I didn't go to high school together in Cape Cod.
It's a weirdly common name, and I don't like. Yeah. I accidentally met someone online who is also named Chris Reynolds, who is also a web developer, and it was really weird for a couple years, like sort of following him and following his web development process as well, because it was at the time that I was freelancing, so that there were two Chris Reynolds web developers, and I think we were both using WordPress. It was a really weired.
That is a crazy doppelganger. I have actually two doppelgangers name-wise. One is. I actually have an article on my personal blog explaining how I'm not in any way related to this actual criminal named Jesse Friedman. But there's actually another Jesse Friedman that I ran into just by chance, spelled exactly the same way. And he used to work at Google on the Google Maps team. So not quite as exact as WordPress, but still in the technical world. And actually the way in which I met him was that he started getting emails from me because my email address was my name with my middle initial in it, and his was the same exact one, just without the middle initial. And so he started getting emails from folks who were trying to get a hold of me because they just happened to leave out the middle initial. And so he's like, I think this is yours. I don't know how he put it together, but he did. And so he ended up building, working at Google, you have access to all these tools. He built some filters and stuff to like push some emails directly to me that are inadvertently going to him. So he created like a little auto mail responder. So we ended up talking and becoming actually kind of friendly. It was kind of cool.
I had CS Reynolds at Gmail for a long time because, when Gmail was brand new, I wanted to have a professional sounding kind of email address. Towards the end, like I ended up shutting it down because I was getting so much stuff for other CS Reynoldses in the world that it was no longer tenable. And it was just like, it's just table flip, start over, brand new.
Yeah, that's right. All right. So in the last episode, we had a great conversation about support and, coming up from that kind of a background, empowering you to put yourself in the shoes of your end customers and all that stuff. And you found your way to Pantheon, and you're a developer advocate there. You're beta testing these products and software, putting yourself in the shoes of your end customers, trying to make sure that these products before they go live are ready for the big show and all that. So, I don't think it's true to say that every single hosting company out there has a developer advocate. I don't think it's, I think that a lot of companies have Q&A, folks who are working in Q&A, things like that. Typically, from my perspective, those people are much more focused on like actual bugs or making sure that you're writing code in compliance with whatever regulations you put in place and things like that. But they're not necessarily focusing on that empathetic standpoint or trying to think about how your products are going to be actually used by end customers. So, as you think about your role within Pantheon, how do you think that translates to the rest of the hosting industry and what a hosting company should be considering when, maybe thinking about building a position like that? And, maybe think about some examples that you could share, like where, having your role has really helped to save the day, or maybe there's, an example or a story of when Pantheon really was able to move faster or solve a problem quicker or something like that because of the existence of your role.
Well, I'll start off by saying that the way that DevRel lives at different companies is different. There's like a million different ways that developer relations can exist within an organization. Sometimes it's very technical. Sometimes you're doing a lot of coding. Sometimes you're doing more like content focused, like blogs, live streams, videos, documentation, that sort of thing. At Pantheon, we're kind of we wear a lot of different hats kind of simultaneously. But the thread that's always been present, at least as far as I've known, has been that we're also really deeply involved in the developer community of people that use Pantheon and in the CMSs that we support. So really trying to get like in the weeds and being there with the people that are potentially using our software, so that we have a good connection to them. That's at least like when I joined DevRel, because for a while we didn't have a developer relations team anymore. We had some layoffs, and that whole function was dissolved for about a year. And as I said, I came to Pantheon partially because of the developer relations team, because I had met them in person. I thought they were really cool. I got to know them and got to know the product through the developer relations team. And really, when I joined Pantheon, it was with this idea that like I know that Pantheon does DevRel really well, and maybe someday, like I was already in a place where like I'm kind of done with the day-to-day engineering stuff. I kind of want to do this other thing and be able to like play more really like, and so when I learned that the team was being reformed, I immediately was jumped over. I think my interview process was like from like literally five days, not 5 business days, but 5 actual calendar days between my first interview and being offered the position. Wow. Which was pretty fun. But I think part of that is because I was already doing that sort of job, and already like answering questions in the community Slack and whatever. But so DevRel can have a lot of different flavors depending on where you are, and it can be in different parts of the organization. Right now, we actually just recently moved developer relations into the product organization within Pantheon. Previously, we were in marketing. Marketing tends to be a fairly common place where developer relations goes, even though like as marketing, like I'm not a marketer. The things that I do, maybe they're marketing adjacent, but it's really like the types of stuff that I would be creating from a marketing standpoint is really sort of like long tail stuff, right? It'd be like, a blog post that maybe somebody will read in a year from now and be like, oh, maybe I'll consider Pantheon because they are really good at this thing or they have this idea or whatever. It's not a thing that's going to immediately turn into inbound leads, right? Which is a lot of what marketing is about. It makes a little bit more sense in product because that means that we're more closely aligned with the things that our product is doing, our product engineering teams are doing, which fits with sort of what we do. It's also sometimes developer relations is stacked under sales, which is also a really weird fit. I know I have talked to one of my former coworkers at WebDev was Damon Cook, who works at WP Engine as a developer advocate. I remember talking to him before when I was considering moving into developer advocacy, and he was telling me that WP Engine has DevRel under sales, and I always thought that was really weird. So it's not even like, so the things that they're producing, like they're done with an aim for selling the product to their customers, and maybe they're selling it to a technical customer, like, but that's still like it still has that sort of end goal, and that's often there's and from what I've heard of other people in developer relations, that sales, when it's nested under sales, there's always that sort of tension of like, it doesn't really fit here, but we're going to make it work. But like, there's like sales has these expectations that are just kind of unrealistic for the type of work and the function that we do. Where the developer relations really excels is in like being able to connect with and give value to. I mean, it's for the developers who use the thing, right? Not every software needs a developer relations team necessarily. But if you are building an ecosystem of people building with your tools, then it's helpful to have a team of people that kind of know how it's done, or at least know how to guide you along in your journey as you're learning this thing, right?
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, the idea that I could see the complexities and the tension of having a developer advocate working under a sales team, because anytime that you're in that close proximity to another team, you almost inherently take on their goals and their initiatives. And so
Right.
I would imagine your role would be very different if it was less about providing and ensuring a really great experience for that customer, but instead creating an experience that's sellable, or that can increase revenue. And of course, no shame to anybody out there. We all got to keep the lights on. I totally understand that,
Right.
but it's very different when you think about it from that perspective. Is like, are you building this to provide a really excellent experience, which will naturally fund sales, or are you trying to shape the experience around something that appears to be highly sellable and will drive revenue, but maybe doesn't have at its core, the need to create a great experience? And so I could see how that could be pretty complicated and create a little bit of tension there, and maybe even make the developers advocates experience a little bit frustrating, because you want to give feedback and you want to help make this product better, but maybe your advice is not going to help it sell better, or maybe there's a really great tool out there that sells like crazy, but maybe it's not really providing the best experience, and so now you're not in a position to really advocate for even like removing it or building it from the ground up, because the sales team's afraid of touching it.
When my boss asked me like where I thought DevRel should fit in within Pantheon when we were considering like moving out of marketing, my initial response is, well, in a perfect world, we would live independent of any stack, right? Because I see developer relations as being sort of like a medium between different parts of the company, both like in between the company and our users. Like, we should kind of float and have good working relationships with kind of everyone, because we're representing what sort of the user experience of the product is.
Yeah.
So like ideally, we don't have anybody over us, right? Like ideally, we just kind of live in this like amorphous like space that kind of like hovers over and like connects with different people at different times. But the reality is, usually it's nested under something.
Sure.
And that something depends on really, I think, in the industry within like sort of DevRel broadly, it's usually which person in which department cares the most about the types of things that DevRel could do. And a lot of times developer relations teams are kind of spun up without a full understanding of what it does. And I'm very thankful that like I feel at Pantheon we have always sort of understood that, because foundationally like our founders were basically doing DevRel when they made Pantheon.
Yeah.
They were speaking at events. They were talking about how they built Pantheon, why you should use Pantheon because that's what they did, and these are the decisions that led to like the architectural decisions that we made. And there are leaders in the Drupal community for doing that. And so, we're sort of just an extension of, Josh and David Strauss and, the Zach Rosen, the people who built Pantheon from the ground up. We're just kind of like continuing the legacy of things that they did when they first founded the company.
Yeah, that's great. It actually kind of brings me back to like my role within WP Cloud and thinking about the way in which we're going to market with what we have. We have a WordPress first cloud platform that is only for WordPress, and the way in which we're going and servicing hosting companies is giving them basically WordPress as a service. And the beauty of the product that we're shipping is that we handle the security, we handle the performance, we handle all these elements underneath their infrastructure. But we're removing the business of it. And what I mean by that is that WP Cloud operates and an API layer below whatever way in which they go to market. So we're going to focus on providing these experiences and making sure that sites are fast and reliable. But then they can go to market with any way they want. They can craft an experience that is catered to their end customer and give them, and it empowers them to really differentiate themselves. And it's not us driving in any way a specific narrative around how it is that they need to shape things. Like, and it's funny because we talk to different customers. Like Convesio recently went live with WP Cloud, and they actually went in a different way that a lot of other customers are going, where they're using WP Cloud to go up market and to service enterprise level customers, similar to like what Pantheon does. Convesio was already doing that, but they wanted to be able to provide something at the same level of quality, but do it at scale. And so that's how they're leaning on WP Cloud to do that, at actually moving down market and selling lower tier pricing plans. And so, you just kind of, when you mentioned that, you really just kind of like drove it home for me that like one of the real advantageous elements here is that whether or not you're building software for an end customer or you're building a platform for a partner, being focused on the experience that you're providing and the way in which you're delivering that product, but getting out of the way in which they want to use it is important, so that they can go and they can employ it any way they want to, build their own workflows on it, build their own panel on top of it, incorporate it into their agency program, like however they're doing it. You're really focused on just providing them with an excellent experience and giving them the freedom. It's very much like, I think, like how it must feel at Microsoft or Mojang before it was Microsoft, and working on Minecraft. My daughter is a huge fan of Minecraft, and the things that she builds are absolutely amazing. And I have to think to myself, like, the ways in which they're instituting some new piece of the puzzle in Minecraft, like some new formula thing or a new block or whatever. It's not just about like, oh, I'm going to insert this into a building. You're creating a framework for someone to build endless number of things on top of it. And there's no way in which you can actually forecast or predict how they're going to actually use it in the future. It's just you're giving it the components and the pieces so that someone can actually institute it and build it into their workflows. And that's pretty magical. It's pretty awesome that you get to work on things like that and helping customers to, your end customers to really build out. And we talk about this a lot too. Like, you're helping them to build out more efficient workflows to do their jobs better. You're putting, in the end, you end up putting more money in the pockets of agencies because they can do more with less, or they can ship something faster or whatever. They can end up hiring another employee and taking on more work because you've made their workflow so much easier. So that's really cool.
One of the things that is sort of like a banner moment. We've actually gotten this comment more than once, because we just recently had at DrupalCon we had a partner summit, and another newish customer said basically the same thing that we've heard, that's been in slides for like a couple years from somebody completely different. But basically the gist is Pantheon gave me my weekends back.
Yeah.
And it's the idea that because of the tools that Pantheon has, because of the workflows and the automations, and because of how it just improves the workflow, it means that this person didn't need to be on call over the weekend for an important deploy or to monitor, things. They could just trust that Pantheon does the Pantheon things, and they can go back to working 8 to 5 or whatever, and not have to stress about it when they're not at work. And that's honestly, like, if there's like, that's the best testament that I really like. I think that we rely a lot on stories like that to communicate the value of the thing that we've built. Yeah. When I went to DrupalCon, I went to my first DrupalCon last month, and DrupalCon has an opportunity to, like, basically, like, if you have enough space and you have like a PA system, you can just bring a PA system to your booth and like do demos and things, which some people are doing. And we had one of the bigger sponsorships, so we did that. In the past, we've just been presenting, like, DevRel, doing DevRel things and presenting things that Pantheon does and whatever, and it gets some people to turn up. But a pattern that we noticed last year that we leaned into a lot this year was we got an even better response when we just asked some of our partners, some of our customers, to talk about something that they're doing with Pantheon and have them present and tell their story. And those were like I was impressed. Like we were packed for pretty much every one of those booth demos, 15, 20-minute booth demos. And the stories were great, and the quotes that came out of them were amazing, and like it really just drove home the sort of value of like a lot of times DevRel is just taking a step back and letting people do our job for us and just like shining a light on those stories.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's a really great. One of the things I think that's a really great point to drive home. That like you know, sometimes you said shining a light on those stories, but sometimes it's just a matter of connecting the dots, right? Like being a conduit or a way to communicate what someone's experiencing, positive or negative, and bringing that back to the people who are actually building the products to inform their decisions and help them to move things forward. And like in that example you said before, like if you're bringing that back to a sales team, that's very different, I think, than bringing it back to a team of developers or product people who are focused on building something there.
But obviously there's a sales overlap, right?
Of
like
course,
those are stories that are going to help sales, right?
Right.
To have those sort of use cases and testimonials and things, those are like gold in your pocket when you're going into sales meetings. But yeah, I mean it's just different interests, and there's different flavors of developer relations depending on where in the organization structure you happen to be.
So when you're interviewing folks or talking to them and thinking about it on behalf of your team and your product team, how do you balance what a developer wants versus maybe what the Pantheon or any hosting company wants to promote or sell or anything? Like how do you help to prioritize things that the people you're interviewing are asking for, or areas where you think that a new evolution would fill a gap over something that may have an easy price tag on it or something like that?
Well, we've always had this challenge of surfacing insights that are coming from the customer base internally to become sort of features of the product, and also outwardly telling people what we are doing to solve those problems, or alternately not solve those problems, right? And so we recently launched a roadmap tool. Uses product board. It's at I believe roadmap.pantheon.io, where you can go and you can see all the things that we're working on, and you can upvote things that you're interested in. You can submit new ideas, and those go directly to product managers. Product managers can assign it to a particular, connect it to another idea that's already been surfaced. Each idea that comes in from a customer, or each upvote basically increases the value internally that, we're going to be looking at this thing more because there's more people that have asked for this or a similar feature. And that's a really valuable tool that we're starting to lean into more to really drive some of the product decisions that are happening. One thing that I think that has come out of that, or two things. I mean, a thing that has been perhaps lacking in the platform forever is that as people started building their sites and really leaning into using things like GitHub for hosting the code for their site, Pantheon comes with its own Git repository, which is really great. It's one of the things that I loved as a developer about Pantheon. But we also don't have like pull requests and code reviews sort of built-in processes, things that you are now used to seeing in issue queues and whatever that you're used to seeing on GitHub and that teams use GitHub for. So having an interaction between a GitHub repository and a Pantheon site has been a place where a lot of people have sort of built their own integrations. For a while, we had a thing called build tools where it would like create a sort of layer through, this is pre-GitHub Actions even, a set of workflows that would connect the dots. But now we're building a native integration first with GitHub and then with other version control systems like GitLab and Bitbucket and whatever, where it doesn't, like, basically wherever your code lives, if it lives in GitHub, if it lives in Bitbucket, that is now the code server. We were not going to manage the Git repository anymore. We'll just let you do the Git repository and use whatever tool you want. And that's obviously, like, that's a thing that people have been wanting for years, for possibly a decade. And that's a thing that's being and that's one of the things that I've been playing with a lot myself as well recently. Another thing that has come up, which I think got a lot of
when
momentum
you
really
when you,
quickly.
just before you move on there, it's the idea that
Yeah.
there's something that has been around for a long time that people have wanted for a really long time. I think that's where your role can really feed into that sales position, right? Because then you can
Yes.
say, hey, this has been something that people have been wanting. It's a blocker. Maybe there was a
Yes.
lot of people who didn't sign up. And then there's probably a correlation there that's, if you are working in a sales team at a hosting company, something to think about might be like keeping track of the customers who would have signed up if it were for this thing. And then using
Yes.
that
A
to,
1000%.
yeah, right. And then using that to fund the products. And then when that gets released, then all of a sudden you have now a book of business that you could be calling, reaching out to,
Yeah.
whatever, and saying, hey, we have that thing now. Come on over. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and it's funny because, like, as I said, like, people have been implementing their own versions of this for years. If you go to the GitHub Actions marketplace and do a search for deploy to Pantheon, there are 3 different actions called deploy to Pantheon or that deploy to Pantheon as GitHub Actions, none of which are maintained by us. We're going to fix that
Right.
problem. We're working on a native one ourselves. That's going to do those things. One of them is by Ali. One of them is by 10up. One of them is by a former Pantheon.
Oh, cool.
So it's just really funny that like going there myself as somebody who works there, I'm like, yeah, that we should definitely have something in this list, right? Like it shouldn't just be, but it's also notable that like I said, 10up and Alley, those are companies that I recognize and I trust that have built solutions for this in different ways. And
It's
seeing
funny
them
you
sort
mentioned
of
10 Up has
building
one
that.
in there. I feel like, going back just to the last episode where we talked about you coming up in the community and myself coming up in the same way. Jake Goldman from 10 Up actually used to live here in Rhode Island where I'm located, and he was one of the earliest people who I worked with in the early community there. And he always exemplified this idea of giving back in terms of WordPress and open
Mhm.
source and everything. And I just feel like you see that all over the place with 10 Up. There's always 10up just seems to be everywhere where they just like, we built this
Yep.
thing for ourselves, and then we release it. And actually just coincidentally out of Rhode Island, Aaron Ware, who was on this podcast from Lynchpin, has basically done the same thing. His agency has all these intricate little tools and little helpers and everything else that they use all the time, and then they just release them for free. And I think it just goes to show, like, very much like that the WordPress community, a lot of the people who have seen a lot of success within WordPress have come up on the backs of benevolent people who have helped them kind of
Yeah.
get there themselves. And so that instills in them this need to give back to the community. And you see that through all these different products peppered around. I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but I just, when you mentioned 10up having one of those things out there, like I was like, that is exactly the way in which they operate. If they're going to build a thing, they're just going to give it away. Like, they're just going to help other
Yep.
people be more successful.
Yeah, well, and going back to that conversation too, like one of the things I that was fundamental for my growth within WordPress and my reason for sticking around was like the blogging system that I used before WordPress was called sblog, and it's sort of like when Matt tells the story of B2 Cafe Log, like it the story of like your developer goes missing, we don't know what's going on, there's no development for a period of time. It was very similar with this sblog, and I found it on some website called Hot Scripts, which is hilarious now that I think about it. Um, but yeah, it's sort of like it had a slower development cycle. The developer kind of went missing for a while. I'm like, okay, well, there's problems, there's things that I need fixed. Um, I'll try WordPress out, and the thing that kept me around in WordPress was knowing that, or realizing that whenever I had a question or a problem, I could do a search on the internet, and I would either find a piece of documentation on that thing, or I'd find a blog post about that thing. And it just, like you said, the community just putting that time in. And so that's what led me to both get involved in the documentation team for Core, for getting involved in WordCamps in the local WordPress community and becoming a speaker and all those things. And then teaching, doing Pluralsight courses, all of that stuff was because of my growth in WordPress was foundationally because WordPress has been so good at just maintaining such a high level of documentation and just an ecosystem
For
around it.
sure.
And that was my way of giving back is being able to feed back into that sort of cycle.
Yeah, that's really cool. Are you have you officially, you obviously contributed back through documentation, but are you a core contributor as well?
I have a couple core commits to my name. I think that I my first actual core commit was just like a doc block that I fixed something
Yeah,
for.
but you remember the
I
reason
I
I'm asking is
actually
because you remembered the day you got your wings, right? Like the day that you were actually mentioned in a core release. Because I remember mine, and it was another thing. It was rather small, but like the thing that I was fixing was just this like little thing that bugged the crap out of me. It was just in the header when you started a new site. It was just providing a poor experience to an to an end user trying to figure out how to get started with WordPress. And so it was like, I don't know, 6 lines of code to just clarify a statement. But it was just one of those moments where you feel like you're writing code that is going to be implemented on millions of websites on a large percentage of the entire internet, which is this huge, like monumental thing. But also just, it's like this moment of recognition for giving back to a community that's helped you so much. So that's why I wanted to ask, because I was like, I bet you remember the first commit you had, because I think everybody does.
Yeah, well, more recently, one of my colleagues, Phil Tyler, likes to say that I single-handedly punted the font manager out of
Oh,
6.4,
really?
because when that was being discussed in the GitHub repository, I tried it out on Pantheon, and because our system is a read-only file system for the live sites, there was no way of managing fonts in the implementation that was built originally, and so we would need to there was no way of like changing where fonts were stored or whatever, so people would not be able to use the font manager from day one unless there was a filter or a constant or
Right.
something to at least customize that. And because I was loud enough about that in the right channels, it got punted. It got punted out of that release, and it was put into 6.5 or 6.6. And at which point there was it was a whole conversation about where the best place to put those things are, why it should be in a different place, pros, cons, whatever. And also I think a filter in place to modify it. And really all I needed was a filter. Like, give me a filter and I'm happy, because then we can just put it into our MU plugin and just move along.
Yeah.
But it did lead to more conversation, which I was happy to see, because not just us, I mean, we're not the only ones that have a read-only file system, but we are, we host a lot of sites and we do have a read-only file system. And yeah, that was, so I have props for that as well, because I was just in the GitHub being a problem.
You know, it's funny. I think that, a pessimistic person might look at that and say like, oh, well, so you're pushing the change because it's just going to mean more work for your customers on Pantheon. But the real reason that you're doing it is because you're extending your role beyond advocating for Pantheon customers, and you're giving back to the community and advocating for the experience across the entire ecosystem, which kind of goes back to a common theme that we see within this podcast every single time I'm interviewing somebody. We circle back to this concept that a host has a responsibility to the WordPress community. And the reason that I say that is because if you look at the Pantheon website, right, you talk very heavily about the WordPress hosting that you're providing and the speed and the performance that you get and the other things and everything else. And so if you're convincing someone to come to Pantheon to have a good WordPress experience, and you don't provide a great WordPress experience, then you're doing a disservice to the WordPress community, because now people may lose faith in what WordPress actually means and what the core value that you get out of WordPress. And so I love seeing that you're extending your role beyond just the parameters of solving for Pantheon, but you're giving back to the WordPress community. But let me ask you this, and this will probably be our final question because we're already at time. I can't believe another half an hour has gone by so fast.
Wow.
But where do you see a developer advocate having more formal responsibility back to the WordPress community? Like, is this something that you would expect a developer advocate at any hosting company to be doing and feeding feedback back to the community, or or is this like something that you want to do out of the goodness of your heart, and it's less of a responsibility of the role and more just how you came up and where you came from?
I definitely gravitate toward sort of community-based things because that was my entry point, right? And I definitely that's just part of who I am, and it just coincides with the work that I do, because the work that I do happens to be really good, that I happen to be already invested in the community and talk passionately about the community. But I fundamentally believe that, like, so Dries Boytart, the founder of Drupal, wrote a very well-known blog post about the maker-taker relationship. That there are people who make the thing, and then there's people that just take and profit off the thing. And a lot of the characterization around hosting is in this idea that hosts are just are takers, that we don't have, you know, a million hours of contribution back into the source code, Drupal, WordPress, whatever it is, then we're just profiting off of the software that we're building, that we're using. And I think that is a misrepresentation of the impact that a provider has on the overall ecosystem. Because like you said, like, we're doing things, like, we're involved in the community, we're helping the ecosystem grow and thrive. And maybe it doesn't have a tangible number of commits associated with it, but it is still helping the health of the community and the software by being able to scale to thousands of websites, or like a single multi-site with like 5,000 subsites on it, or whatever. You know, like, you wouldn't know that was possible unless you had teams and people in the spaces and making sure that it can run on a hosting platform at that scale.
Yeah. And
so
I think that's key to your role too, right? We talked earlier about how you're someone who's connecting dots and conveying ideas and helping to shape the things that your people are building, whether at Pantheon or WordPress core, by highlighting your experience and those of the people who are using it. So I think you're absolutely right. I think that there's more than just core commits as a way to contribute back, and there's so much more. I mean, you mentioned documentation and other things, and but it sounds like what you're saying is that, like, at the end of the day, whether it is core commits or not, like, there is a need for an institution that's selling WordPress to give back in some way to the community, to preserve it, to make sure that it's going to live another 100 years and be there for us in the future. Yeah. Yep. Very cool. All right, great. Well, this was another fantastic conversation. I really loved having you on, Chris. I would love to have you back. And if there's anything else you want to say before we go, otherwise, thanks so much for a great episode.
Well, I'm on the socials, at least occasionally. I'm Jazz Sequence in most places. You can find me online. I'm happy to talk about Pantheon or WordPress or other things. And yeah, I'm thanks for having me on.
That's great. Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for joining us on another episode of Impressive Hosting, where we uncover the core tenets of great WordPress hosting. Do you have a follow-up question for today's guest, thought or comment on anything we talked about, a future guest suggestion, a hosting horror story? What do you think makes great WordPress hosting? All your comments shape this show. Drop them on impressive.host. We also appreciate you following us on social media and subscribing to the podcast on your favorite platform. Finally, do check out our list of open source projects that need support at impressive.host. Whether it's code, community, or cache, you can make a difference. See you next time.